Hello and welcome. This is Nancy Cooper, the Activation Alchemist, and this is your Alchemelia podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that I think is really, really important for us to be mindful of while we're in this spiritual space and in the spiritual community. It's something that I feel like probably isn't really talked about enough. Like there's awareness around it, but there's not really enough conversation about it. And that is really to differentiate friend from fraud. Okay, so I'm not quite sure what it is that attracts certain people to this realm of wanting to present themselves as a spiritual leader or someone who is highly in tune or connected spiritually, when indeed they are not highly connected. They're not highly in tune. They're really operating more from a very wounded space. And unfortunately, it almost seems like sometimes these individuals, it's like a sense of importance that comes with their position in the spiritual community, instead of actually being in service to the divine and to humanity and to the awakening of humanity. So I wanted to kind of go through this with you all and help you kind of see and look for different signs of how do you know, okay, how can you differentiate between a friend in the spiritual realm and a fraud, okay? So one of the first things we're going to talk about is really important. Followings and supply and demand do not always equal quality or really like truth or really anything along those lines. Okay, so supply and demand and that kind of sort has to do with marketing. And so if you have an individual who has really fantastic marketing skills, knows how to market themselves, knows how to promote themselves, knows how to self-promote, how to talk themselves up, they will easily find a community that will grow and honestly pay sometimes astronomical prices for certain services. There's kind of a set going rate, and I'm not trying to say that people should limit themselves in this space, because again, there is a supply and demand, and sometimes people will organically create a following, and that at some point, it gets too exhausting to fulfill all of the orders. And so in order to make a living, in order to be able to be dedicated to that kind of work, these individuals may need to raise prices. But there's, again, a limit on what's appropriate for this kind of stuff. So keeping an eye out on that kind of stuff where it's almost like if it seems too good to be true, then it is kind of thing. And that's when, if someone's charging, an exorbitant amount for a reading or for something like that, and I mean, thousands of dollars, which I have seen, that's when it's kind of okay. This is where it starts to kind of pique our attention, right? Where we're like, oh, I need to investigate this more, right? We're just going to look into it more, because this person may very well be absolutely astoundingly amazing. This is where you want to try to check references. You want to just kind of make sure that this person connects with you, that it feels right, that there is a level of trust there, and that you have kind of like dotted your I's and crossed your T's kind of thing, and thinking, okay, I've done my due diligence here. Like, this person is legit, and I'm really excited about getting a reading with them. And, huzzah for them for getting their business to the point where they need to charge this amount. Okay. So that's just kind of like one of those things to look at. It's not always clear. Like, if you're like, gosh, why are they paying or charging so much for this? That does not automatically like rule someone out or rule someone in, I guess is the point. It's like, just because they're charging a high amount or a premium amount does not necessarily mean it's going to be a premium service. So this is, again, where it's just a thing of doing due diligence, getting in touch with people that have had the services, finding genuine reviews and things like that. Just kind of doing that due diligence before taking that step and making that move. Now, something else to keep in mind when we are looking for spiritual practitioners and people to work with us in that spiritual energetic space are going to be people that we need to be mindful of their alignment. Okay. And what I mean by this is, where are they coming from? What realm are they working in? So sometimes, we'll be in different groups and we'll see these random people posting those spam posts where they're like, oh, I've been drawn to you. I have a reading for you. It's like that kind of stuff where it's like, okay, this does not feel aligned. This does not feel good. This does not feel right. It's kind of that energy. But unfortunately, there's not really always that kind of like obvious energetic expression of that. Sometimes things can look really nice, and things can seem very appealing, where it's like, oh wow, they charged this much and they sold out this and they did that. But this is where you want to go through and kind of check out their maybe their personal like social media. What's going on in their life? How does their life look? Do they look like they stay well aligned? Do they look like they practice what they preach? That kind of stuff we want to be mindful of and kind of take a close look at, because when we're inviting someone to come into our space, this is a very intimate thing to do. And we want to make sure that that's happening from a highly aligned and for the greatest good of all kind of perspective and energy. And it's not going to be in a space of anything else, really. So you can find people that are maybe going through really hard times. You can find people that are still operating from wounding. I've seen this a lot, where there's still a lot of practitioners and teachers out there that you look through their stuff, and sometimes people are not aware because they're still in a space of wounding. So it seems normal to them. But if you're in a space of healing and calling in healing and feeling that type of energy, it's pretty easy to recognize the wounded energies that are coming through. So it's like being mindful of that, being watchful, and really deeply considering who it is that we want to tap into our energy, right? Because our energy is sacred. And we want to make sure that we protect it. So we don't want to just kind of call in anyone that's kind of in any kind of space mentally. Like, people need to be aligned. That's one of the reasons why I personally, when I do readings and when I do things like that, I do not schedule them. I have them come through, and then I do them when I feel aligned and connected. So there could be times where it's like, oh man, I have a call and I'm like frazzled. I'm not there. I'm not like that. That doesn't work. I want to make sure that I can have quiet, that I can tune in, that I can have peace, that I feel connected and do my ritual to fully expand my third eye, get it open, get connected in the realm, and so that I can receive information properly without having someone else giving feedback also during that. So just another thing to kind of consider where we have our energy go, right? Is just looking at another individual and saying, okay, where are they energetically? And is this someone who has energy that I would like to emulate? And do they have energy that I would like to be co-creating with inside mine? Because that's where that energy is going to go. It is going to be into a co-creation type of space. And we really, really want to make sure that that's a pure space, right? So another thing that we really want to be mindful of when working with spiritual practitioners is we want to connect with someone who is helping us to remember and not telling us what happened. Okay, so this is something that's actually really, really important, and I don't feel like it gets discussed enough. This is something where when I talk about you remembering it versus someone just telling you, I've come across clients where they've told me about past situations, past psychics, past energy healers that they work with that have told them about different things that have happened. And I asked them, I'm like, well, how do you feel about that? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay. Cause I'm not getting anything on that. And so I'm like, okay, I'm confused. So unfortunately what happens is these individuals have this, idea in their mind about what has happened in past lives, what's going on, with them energetically now because of that past life. And honestly, none of it's true. So some other individual has now projected a new reality onto this person that they're now operating from. And for me personally, I see that as a type of dark witchcraft, where you're projecting another reality onto someone else for your own gain. This is not a good thing to do. So when we are having a reading, or when we are working with someone, maybe they're doing a psychic reading, they're doing a tarot reading, they are doing energy healing, any of that kind of stuff, there should be a sense of things being familiar. Okay, so when someone is relaying the story or the message, I'll give an example. So I did an energy healing session for one of my weekly energy healing clients, and I was explaining to her what I saw in the vision, what was happening during the healing session, and I mentioned an individual in a cloak. I could not see them well. I was having difficulty understanding who they were until it came through that it was their higher self. And it was very interesting, because once she got that recording, she messaged me back and she was like, thank you so much. That's always how my higher self appears to me too. And I have yet to be able to actually see her. And so there was that resonance, right? It was connecting. Like for her, she's like, yes, this is true, because I've seen this before myself. I had no idea that she had witnessed that before. Or for someone who, when you're speaking to them, I had another client who we were trying to kind of dig in and figure out what happened with her past life to create her witch's wound, with the past life persecution. And there was such a severe block because of the trauma that she just could not access the information. So I offered to access it for her as a surrogate and to see if it would come through for me. It did. And as I relayed the information back to her, what I was seeing, she immediately felt it in her whole body. She could feel chills. She felt like tingling in her body. She could feel like a tingling sensation at the base of her spine. And she just began to cry. And she's like, yes. Like she could just feel that it was truth. So if we're working with someone and when they say something and it doesn't resonate as truth, this is a sign that it's not, right? We should be able to feel this. It should be like, yeah, I remember this, like a recollection instead of new information. So this is something that's really, really important that we want to be mindful of when we're working with someone is, do I feel this as truth that I'm remembering it, or is this something that somebody else is projecting onto me? Okay, so this is very, very important. Another thing is being watchful about kind of like generic messages. Okay, so when someone comes up and they have like something very generic, I've seen this before in like groups and different things where individuals will give they'll say, let's do intuitive messages, let's give guidance, and that's totally fine. Again, I'm not criticizing anyone. But then there will be like a message that is so generic where it's like, yeah, that could easily apply to anyone and anything because it's so generic. There's nothing really like connected in it. So this is just something to kind of be watchful and mindful. And of course, that message very well may be something that was meant for you and you could feel it resonate and you're like, okay, cool, that's awesome. But it's also something to be aware of that, it could easily have kind of been something where it's like, okay, like, that's so generic. Like, anyone and anything could have been applied to that. And there are unfortunately some people that are very, very good at that kind of stuff. So it seems like you're like, oh, wow, cool. And then afterwards you're like, I don't really feel like I learned anything. 'Cause at the time it felt really connected. It was like, oh, I see this white light and there's, a person there. And then, it's like, well, who was the person? What's happening? So it's kind of like looking for those significant details as well, that are going to help kind of make it all make sense, right? So that it can be pieced together so that there is that remembrance instead of just being like, I don't know what happened. Like, I'm confused. So we don't want to have that feeling. We don't want to have that feeling of kind of being like left in the dark still, right? There should definitely be a feeling of, yes, this resonates, this connects, that makes sense to me. That's like perfectly timed. And that can happen even with like card pulls, obviously those are generic, but when people are doing card pulls, you can tell if there's someone who's connected because the card pull is very, it's like perfect. It's like perfectly timed for what's going on with that other individual. The message seems like perfectly aligned with them. And then others where they do card pulls and you're like, okay, like it just doesn't, it doesn't connect, right? So this is where it's like a sign to us, how connected that person is, and how much of a conduit that person is. So those are all things that are really, really important, to really think about and consider when we're going through and kind of seeking, services from spiritual practitioners. Okay. It's very, very important. And it's also important, I guess we'll say kind of one more thing is, sometimes we'll come across like spiritual practitioners who they have a program or they have something that's already created and their goal is just to try to get people into that. This is another thing that's very, very important is making sure that where you're going is aligned with where you're going. So what this means is like, if you're going to go into a container someone's program, make sure it's aligned with where you are moving, okay? So like for someone who is not dealing with witch's wound issues, it wouldn't be an ethical thing for me to try to sell them and get them into my witch's wound workshop, right? If I get on the phone with them and talk to them and see what's going on, it's not my goal to just sell them. It's my goal to help them. It's my goal to guide them in the right direction. It's my goal to aid them in their work for the highest good. And if I'm not the person for that, then I'm not the person for that. And that's okay. Maybe one of my friends or associates would be a better fit for them. And that does happen. I've had people reach out and they've asked for help with certain things like astrology and things like that. And I'm like, I don't do that. I'm aware of it. I work with that kind of stuff and I talk about it, but that's not my specialty. So I refer them over to someone else whose specialty it is, because that's what they need help with. I'm not just going to be like, oh, let me just sell you on this program because I want to be making money right now off of you. Like, that's not the right thing to do, right? That's an ethical thing to do. So this is kind of like the last thing to be aware of, is when people are trying to get us into a space that is just really not, it's just not a fit for us. It's not what we need. Now, do I think that pretty much most women have a witch's wound and need to go and do the process of bringing it up and working to heal it? Yes, I do. But if that's not what's coming up for that person and coming up as a concern or issue, then like that's not going to help them at that time. So I can try to figure out something else that I could offer or refer them. So this is something to be very, very mindful of as well. So when someone's trying to like force you to fit into their pre-made course or package, and it's just not what you need. So that's another very, very important thing to kind of watch and be aware of. Okay, so I hope that this is helpful. I hope that everything was presented in a loving manner. That was my intention. There's no criticism here for anyone or anything. Everyone has a different style of doing things. Everyone operates from a different space. This is why it's just important to follow these kind of guidelines to just kind of feel it out, see who you connect with, see who you align with, see who kind of resonates with you, and then go from there. Kind of check in with people that have worked with them, read reviews, different things like that, and then, kind of compare and contrast like the value and different things like that. It's just being observant and going ahead and tapping into your own intuition when it comes to working with someone who's going to be tapping into your sacred energy. All right. I will talk to you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining, and namaste.